Welcome to another bone-chilling episode of Back to the Past with me. I am Blair. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing here, which is essentially to run ceiling joists in here that go all the way across that follow the same pattern as the two big built-up rafters or trusses that I made on each end. They are not only there to look nice, which I think it's going to, but structurally it's needed there. So stick around and we'll get right back into it. To get into the engineering side of things just a little bit, that structural ceiling is going to help me to do two things. The load that comes down from the top actually is pretty evenly distributed across it if, say, there's something like a snowstorm that comes in. What that centerpiece or that structural ceiling does is two things. At this point, it helps to take some of the load off the center of the span and put it over on the beam on this side, and then of course just the opposite. The main thing that it does is as we have a load that comes down, we also have a load that's created that goes out. So those ceiling joists that go all the way across are also somewhat in a, let's see, would it be a tension load that prevents things from blowing out in the side direction. In Colorado, where I lived in the mountains of Colorado, where there was a 90 pound per square foot snow load, that was a huge deal and an absolute necessity. Here, the snow load is probably less than what the dead load of the roof, which means the weight of all of the lumber, the sheathing, the shingles, and that kind of stuff is. So here it probably isn't nearly as big a deal. If this were really critical, that what we would do is to tie these, let me get my fingers right again, tie these 2 points together with a flat board going across the top of that. And that would take up that tension load. Here, at those angles that I've got it at, the inside pitch is a 3/12 pitch, the outside pitch is an 8/12 pitch. That's going to be more than sufficient, especially knowing that I have 6x10 beams running across each side. The welder's there just because that doggone center of the beam didn't want to come down on its own. So those oak beams in themselves will probably take up most of the spreading load that there is on it, just having the two ends supported. But adding all that support on every single rafter in between is going to make this thing fairly indestructible once I get all of the permanent bracing in. Because Arkansas's climate is so doggone humid, I am using in its entirety for this construction pressure-treated lumber for doing all of the small framing that I'm doing, and then the red oak that I used for the main beams and the end trusses and such are treated with Boracare. So I should have a treatment here that makes this lumber last longer than I will. So very simply, what I have here are 16-foot 2x4s that are attached with structural wood screws on each end, and then 1 1/2-inch bolt right in the middle, bolting them together. Now, as we look at those 2x4 ceiling joists, the one going from, say, left to right is attached to the rafters on the near side of the rafter. The one going from right to left is attached on the far side of the rafter, meaning that there is an 1.5 inch space in between them that needs to be taken up. When I did my attic, I used 12-inch inch long 2x8s and had them extend up above the ceiling joist so that I could put a plank across there and have somewhere to crawl on, since there's a foot of insulation up there. Here there's no insulation, so I don't need anything like that to have attic access. So what I did is I went to my drill press and I made these nifty little donuts that are 3 inches in diameter that sit right between the two-by-fours. All right, I've got my saw set up at 14 degrees, which is what it takes to make up a 312 pitch roof. This here makes up for a vertical line when it's in place. Then we have a horizontal seat, and that horizontal seat I'm cutting at 2 5/8 inches wide. Gives it plenty of bearing, and what it does is it allows me to put in a piece of 2x6 blocking between each rafter then when this is all said and done. I am not going to be as anal about these cuts as I was on the rafter cuts for a couple of reasons. There's just that short amount of bearing here that if it's off just a tiny bit really isn't going to hurt a doggone thing. And then on the upper end, I'm cutting it about 1/4 of an inch short because I don't want anything protruding above the rafters, but if it's about 1/4 of an inch short of it, that's fine too. So neither angle is super critical. Here we go. And the angle of the cut on the opposite end is 42 degrees. Now I will put in these 2 joists and then 2 more directly over me here. And once those are in, then I'll be able to take this doggone spreader out. And this spreader now, it's snug, but it's not tight like it was when I put it in. So everything is just in the right spot, just about dead perfect. I spent nearly all of yesterday morning going up on top, putting in some diagonal braces on top so I could take the underside ones that had the turnbuckles on them off because they were in my way for putting in these ceiling joists. I took care of that. I put in some horizontal temporary 2x4s on both sides and straightened out the rafters to the even 16-inch spacing. So that helped a lot. Then I got to thinking I could probably make it a little cooler in here, maybe gain an extra hour in the morning of working time by putting a plastic tarp up, which I did. You might be able to see it right up there. I put up a plastic tarp and it actually gave me an extra hour or so of shade. And it really served double duty because I am 100% successful in that every time I get to handling plastic sheeting or a plastic tarp, whether it's covering something or folding it up afterwards, the wind always blows. It never fails. And certainly yesterday was no exception to that rule. All the time that I tried putting that up, I had a breeze. And I'd been praying for a breeze for quite some time because it has been just dead still here for an awful long time. Now this should start getting a little easier putting in these ceiling joists. They're actually really easy to cut. But the first ones that you saw me put up, I had to do them all to a string line that ran from essentially peak to peak of the ceiling on each end. So I had to be careful to put them as close as I could to that string line without actually bumping the string line. Now I've got some 2x4s up at that intersection. Also at the intersections, I'm putting in some short ones up at the top too, to where all I have to do is essentially lay that ceiling joist on top of those 2x4s, make sure the end is in the right place on the beam, and screw everything together. Structural ceiling joists are now all in, and it's time to do some blocking, which has to be the most boring part of framing. Something that I've done a lot of times working alone is in handling either this edge board or doing fascia. I can't hold a 16-foot board up there and be able to control it. So what I do is I take a couple of scrap boards, leave enough space that they'll fit in there, and then I just go ahead and put it, well, heck, I'll show you. A lot of Saturday traffic again. So that's just slightly over 16 feet, and ideally 16 feet is exactly what I need. So what I'm going to do, I'll attach it in the center of the rafter on the far end, let this end run wild, and then I'll cut it afterward once I get my overhang all figured out. I think I've done everything I'm going to do on this episode. One thing that I had a problem with that's turned into more of a problem than I thought it might be was these oak trusses bowing. Now on this end it's not too bad. On the far end, the top cord on the south side actually had bowed about 1.5 inches, and pulling that out was absolute hell. In order to do it, I had to go ahead and start with the sheathing, get that all nailed down real good, and then go to a tree on the far side and I come along up to the center of that top cord and put one heck of a strain on it to get it out where it belongs. Now, everything is still not nailed off on that far end and probably won't be for a little while. I'm about to head to Colorado. I wanted things to be safe, but I also thought I'll give that a head start on thinking about straightening itself out. Well, I'm sure that's not going to happen totally. In fact, I'm just hoping that it doesn't get worse. But anyway, I do have it nailed down with 2x4s, some temporary 2x4s across the top with the bow out. So I'm hoping that kind of goes into the woods memory and stays there. We'll see. But I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for being here. Goodbye.